and welcome back to 5 Minutes of Math. This is Mr. Lunsford, and I am glad that you joined me this evening. Tonight's homework is for the evening of March 19th, 2018, and we're looking at benchmark review. All right, we're looking at a benchmark review. Let's get started. All right, so with a benchmark review, these problems don't make sense unless you have the book out and you're working through these problems with me. Okay, so if you're just looking at the YouTube and you're used to not using the book, please take the book out, because that will help you to understand why I'm approaching each one of these problems the way that I'm approaching them. Okay, so the first one is asking which graph best represents the linear function y equals 2x minus 3. All right, so our strategy here is to plug in our x values and just graph it. So our x values, whenever we have to plug in anything, we're picking -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So here's how we take this equation apart. The m, or the slope for 2x minus 3, is just 2. That's the coefficient. And b is -3. That means that that graph has to cross that y-axis at -3. So again, the slope is 2, b is -3. Here's our equation, y equals 2x plus -3, or just y equals 2x minus 3. It's the same thing. So we have x, our formula, and y. If we plug in -2, we get -7. So our first ordered pair is -2, -7. Our next ordered pair is -1, -5. So if you plug in -1, 2 times -1 is -2, plus -3 is -5. -1, -5. The next one, and this is the important part here, when we plug in 0, we get that y-intercept. So 2 times 0 plus -3 is just -3. That's why I said that graph crosses the y-axis at -3. Then 1, we get -1 as our y value, and 2, we get 1 as our y value. So if we look at that graph, here we are. We start with -2, -7, then -1, -5, 0, -3, 1, -1, and 2, 1. So our answer is A. Our answer is A. This graph matches A. Number 2, we have to look at how to turn our words into equation. That's our strategy. We're creating an equation. So we're starting with our total price, which is Y. Our item price we're going to call X. And our sales tax is 5% of our item price. So all we have to do now is start with our words and substitute until we have an equation. Our total price equals our item price plus our sales tax on that item. Then we have our total price equal to X, which is our item price, plus 5% of the item price. Now our total price is X plus 5% of X. And another way to write that is 1x. Remember, 1 is our coefficient whenever we don't have anything behind our variable. So x and 1x are the exact same thing. Our total price is 1x plus 5% of x. Our total price now is 1x plus 0.05 times x. And remember, 5% is a decimal. It's just 0.05. We just divide by 100. Now we just combine those terms. Our total price is 1.05 times x. And the last substitution we do, y equals 1.05x. And our answer is H. Our total price is 1.05 times whatever that item cost. Okay, so our answer is H. Moving on to number 3. Which linear function crosses the axis at 0, -1? So our strategy here is to work backwards. We're going to plug in 0 as our x into each one of those equations until we get a y that's a -1. So here are our choices. Y equals 4x minus 1, y equals x plus 1, y equals -x plus 8, y equals 5x minus 6. Now, the quick way to do this is just to take your thumb and cover up all the x terms. Why is that? Well, it's because that plugging in 0 for x means that we can just take out that x term in each one of those equations. 0 times any number equals 0. So if we're talking about 4x minus 1, 4x is, if we have 0, 4 times 0 is still 0. X plus 1, if x is 0, it's just plus 1. -1 times x, like we have in C, -x plus 8, it's still 0 plus 8, just 8. So that's what you essentially have to do. And if you look at it that way, y equals -1, A is our answer. But let's go ahead and prove that. If we're looking at A and we say that that's our answer, we should say, okay, if I graph this thing, when I plug in 0 for our x, that line should cross the y-axis at -1. If here's our table, and all I did was plug in -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and you'll notice I have a set of ordered pairs here. We have -2, -9, -1, -5, 0, -1, 1, 3, and 2, 7. If we graph this as a line, you'll see that that blue line crosses the y-axis at -1. So A is definitely our answer. All right, moving on. For number 4, our equation is y equals 5x minus 2, which could not be the coordinates of the second point. So we're graphing a line, and we have to figure out which one of these choices is the wrong answer. So let's work backwards. We're going to plug in our x values to the equation that we're given, and we're going to make sure that each one of our answers is right. If we get one answer where the y value that we come out with in our equation is not what's listed in the answer, we found the one that's wrong. Okay, so we have to work through process of elimination. If I plug in 1 to this equation, will I get 3 as my y value? Well, here's the table. 5x plus -2. 5 times 1 plus -2, I get 3. So 1, 3 is correct. So F isn't the answer. Let's look at G. If I plug in 4, what do I get? If I plug in 4, 5 times 4 is 20, plus -2, that's 18. 418 is what I end up with. G is our answer because it's the one that does not match. But just to prove it, I'm going to do the other two. Now, if I plug in -2, I should get -12 from this equation. So 5 times -2 is a -10, plus -2 is -12. H is correct. And J should also be right, so let's prove it. 5 times 3 is 15. 15 minus 2 is 13, so 313 is also correct. Again, we have come back. G is the only answer that doesn't fit, so G is the right response for this question. All right, going on to number 5. Which one of these linear functions has a slope of 2? So if we're looking at these equations, y equals mx plus b, our first one for A, and our strategy again is to work backwards. All we're doing is finding that coefficient that's next to the x. When we find the coefficient that is 2, we have found the equation with a slope of 2. For A, the slope is 1/2. Why is that? It's because x divided by 2 is the same thing as saying 1/2 times x over 1. I didn't write the over 1, but it's 1/2 times x over 1. So the slope here is 1/2. For B, y equals 2, there is no x term. So that's the same as saying y equals 0 times x plus 2. There just isn't any x. So the slope is 0. All right. If we have y equals 5x plus 2, the slope here is 5 because that's the coefficient. Okay. And for D, we have 2x minus 1. The slope here is 2 because that's our coefficient. And of course, you all can see D is our answer. So the answer is D. That's it. Y'all take care, and remember, math is not just about numbers. It's all about the relationships that surround us every day. Have a good one.